This program contains dramatizations of real people and events. Some names have been changed. This program is for mature audiences only. It contains graphic images which may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. A young Oregon mother vanishes without a trace, but a psychic sees everything.
I got the vision of those hands encircling this young woman's neck.
Yet this case has an ending that even surprises the psychic. In California, a mother of 4 goes out one night and never returns. A chance encounter with a psychic tells police what happened.
And initially, when I felt her, I felt a fear, and it was a fear that I had never felt before.
When clues are scarce and answers elusive, investigators sometimes turn to a psychic witness. Eight miles south of Portland, Oregon, lies the residential suburb of Lake Oswego. It's here that a tale of deadly rage and unexpected love begins with a single phone call. On Sunday, March 30th, 1986, Chad Whitman phones the Lake Oswego police. It's about his wife, Zoe. To Officer Dave Alford, it sounds like a routine domestic dispute.
The husband called saying that he and his wife had had a disagreement and that the wife had left and hadn't returned, and he was making a missing person report.
Officer Alford goes for more details.
He had the shades drawn and the light was subdued. He said he was doing that because the baby had a fever, which seemed plausible at the time.
Listen, how long has Zoe been gone? Can you tell me?
It's been about 3 days. I went down.
Chad says that 3 days earlier, he and Zoe had a fight. Only the latest in a series of arguments over money. Zoe stormed out, as she has before. But she's never stayed away this long. Chad says after the argument, he went to Southern California for 2 days to watch his brother Rudy's ball game.
His brother played for a college baseball team, and they had an away game. And he said he'd been with his brother at that game during the weekend.
He suggests Zoe probably went up to Seattle, where she used to live.
Yeah, they said the same
Her
thing.
car's gone too.
She's been...
Well, listen, do you have the registration to the car and maybe a photo of Zoe?
Alfred's gut instinct tells him something's not right.
The husband seemed very passive. His emotions didn't seem totally consistent with the situation. It would have seemed that he would have been more distraught over the wife being gone, more concerned about the baby.
Alfred puts out an APB for Zoe Whitman's car and calls her loved ones. But Zoe, always in constant contact with her family, hasn't called them and hasn't come back for her baby.
A mother doesn't normally leave a baby for several days. So when the weekend was over, the situation became more abnormal.
Then Zoe's family reveals an ominous detail that escaped Alfred.
They wanted to make sure that I knew that the husband of their daughter had scratches on his face. And in fact, I didn't, because he'd used the baby as a shield. I was literally in the dark on that subject because he'd put me there. The family was convinced that he'd been in a fight with his wife and that she'd put the scratches on his face, that they were defensive.
Everyone Alfred talks to, with the sole exception of Chad Whitman, comes to the same conclusion. something ill has befallen Zoe.
Got the information I
Officer
needed.
Alford shares his suspicions with Detective Bob Lee.
I'll tell you, I think this guy is...
Dave Alford said that he had a very, very strange set of circumstances in regard to a missing woman. The suspect, the husband in this case, was not acting like he should have. And it disturbed Dave so bad that he immediately came to the detective division and said he had the overwhelming feeling that the man had murdered his wife and had simply hidden the body someplace.
Suspicion builds on suspicion. The next day, police find Zoe's locked car at a rest stop just north of Oregon, in Washington State. A map of Seattle lies open on the front seat. Investigators don't buy it.
The husband had predicted that his wife might have gone to Seattle where they had friends. However, the map being conveniently open to Seattle was too much of a setup. A person familiar with Seattle doesn't need to leave a map in a car just over the Oregon border.
The peculiarities don't stop there.
The vehicle itself was quite suspicious. Our missing woman was 5 feet tall and weighed 115 pounds. And anybody who's that size is going to sit with a seat very, very close to the steering wheel just to be able to drive the car. We noticed that the seat was pushed in a far distant position, like somebody 6 feet or slightly over 6 feet had actually driven it.
Everything about the car looks like a setup. But investigators have to be sure.
We combed the entire rest area and the area surrounding the rest area just in case our missing woman was going to be stashed off in the bushes someplace. And we came up essentially with nothing.
A crime may have been committed, just not here. No one believes Chad Whitman's story of a devoted mother, normally in regular contact with her family, abandoning her baby and running off. Detective Don Foreman agrees.
And then you start investigating all those circumstances and turning, hey, things aren't adding up, this doesn't make sense, this didn't happen. And then it's not a whodunit, it turns into a he-done-it.
But they need to come up with facts, solid proof, a case they can prosecute. Bob Lee and his team turned to District Attorney Terry Gustafson.
He was absolutely convinced that the husband had done away with the wife and that this was not a missing persons case, but a homicide. And he wanted my assistance in changing it to a homicide. And so we talked about some strategies about how to do that.
To prove murder, what they need is physical evidence. Lee and Alford plan to get it. They return to Chad Whitman's apartment, this time with backup.
We contacted the Oregon State Crime Lab and would convince them to accompany us to the location.
They arrive unannounced, but Whitman isn't rattled.
Sure. Y'all want to come in?
He gives consent to search his apartment and doesn't interfere.
We actually conducted most of our interview outside the apartment in the parking lot while the crime lab did their thing on the inside.
There was a good possibility if the wife had been murdered at the residence or some great harm had come to her, that there would have been some sort of blood found.
The techs use a process called luminol testing, which can reveal the smallest traces of blood. And they find not a drop.
We can't actually put our fingers on the fact that a crime was even committed at this point. And yet we knew, without any doubt at all, that the husband had killed his wife.
She just disappeared, and there weren't a whole lot of leads. We had no body. Without a body and without any ability to disprove the husband's story, we really didn't have a case.
It was especially troubling because as the months went by, All we could tell the family was that we're working on it.
The reason that I'm calling you is that
The family is working on it too.
my daughter Zoe has been missing.
Desperate to find Zoe,
No, we've not.
her mother contacts local psychic, Lori McQuarrie.
I felt that immediate sense of dread, heaviness, a thunk, if you will, right in the middle of my chest. And that's sort of my litmus test of whether a person is dead or alive. I know, and I trust it, and it works.
Lori feels the young mother is definitely dead.
When I relayed that to the family, they agreed. They had felt the same. She was very close to her mom and would never have gone for days without calling her. Almost immediately, I said, I believe her husband's involved in it. I believed that wherever she was not in the backyard, so to speak. She had been moved someplace else, and I felt she was buried.
Lori details a terrible murder. One by one, the facts will bear her out, but the killer has carefully covered his tracks. In March 1986, Zoe Whitman vanishes from her Oregon home. Her husband, Chad, says she ran off while he was in California with his brother. The police, and now a psychic, believe he killed her. Lori McQuarrie came by her psychic ability by accident, after awakening from a 3-day coma caused by a fall from a horse when she was 18.
Many times when people have had traumatic injuries to the head, they will experience this sort of bursts of ESP, telepathy kind of stuff.
Lori worked as an intensive care nurse for 14 years, until she chose to become a full-time psychic in service to others, including Zoe Whitman's family. Lori's not afraid to do the legwork, like visiting a suspected killer's apartment.
It's sometimes very beneficial for me in a case to physically meet with people involved, especially people who might be suspects. Well, lo and behold, the apartment was up for rent. And I immediately thought I could pose as a potential renter and go over there and meet the husband face to face. Hi, I'm Lori McQuarrie. I'm here to see you. He was very bland.
Forensics techs found no evidence of murder inside.
Yep.
Lori's testing is different.
Had fresh paint put on it.
I felt that in walking through the apartment that whatever had happened there. That sense was still lingering there.
Then she applies one final test.
Very nice. I offered my hand because there is a physical energy that transpires between people when they touch, and that's what I had wanted. And the moment I did, I got the vision of those hands encircling this young woman's neck. I knew it immediately, confirmed it for me.
Let me show you.
All right. Even though he was a rather bland personality, I could certainly sense the seething sort of unrest with him in his life, period.
Zoe's family asks Lori if she'll work with police.
They had mentioned a Detective Lee, and I said, of course. I have no problem with that.
But Detective Lee does have a problem with it.
She had more information than she should have had without being a suspect. And I wanted to contact her and find out if she was a nutcase or not.
He was a bit flippant with me. And he said, yeah, I said, I just talked to so-and-so, and they said that I should call you about this case, and I'd like to take you to lunch and check you out. It was a very poor delivery, as far as I was concerned, because I just said, you know, if you want to check me out, I'll send you a brochure. You don't need to take me to lunch. I'll give you the facts on the case. I'll put them in the mail. I didn't need to be treated that way.
Can I take you to lunch?
And he immediately recovered, apologized, and said no, he really, really wanted to take me to lunch.
My preconceived notion of a psychic is a little old lady with gray hair, probably wearing long purple flowing robes, who's got a piece of plywood in her front yard with a handprint on it that says Madam Melba Reeds.
So here's your perfect opportunity.
I was extremely surprised to see that she was an attractive lady in a business setting with none of the woo-woo that I would have expected.
The detective is shocked to learn Lori met the suspect face to face.
And I think you will find ultimately.
I thought that was a very cavalier way of doing things, and that, you know, she was putting herself in an awful lot of danger.
Impressioned with this. When I originally went through all these facts with him, the ones that were most important was, of course, that she was dead, and that her husband had had a great deal to do with it. And I felt she had been strangled. I also felt that the body was buried in a location where her husband could view it daily.
Lori sees a 1 and a 5 having to do with mileage.
Unfortunately, in psychic work, it isn't always explicit. It was either a 1.5 or a 15. I also felt that a younger brother of his was involved. I believe he did not act alone. The main point that we had come to really kind of differ on at first was I told him the younger brother was involved in disposing the body. And I remember him just looking at me like I was absolutely insane.
We couldn't reconcile the fact that the younger brother was in Southern California during the time-critical situation.
Despite the disagreement, Lori gains Bob Lee's trust, much to the surprise of DA Terry Gustafson.
He told me that he was using a psychic. I personally didn't tell him I thought that this was a silly thing to do, but that was my impression. I thought it was a silly thing to do. But I also have tremendous confidence in Bob.
The psychic and the detective begin at the rest area where Zoe's car was found.
And I kept getting the numbers 15 or 1.5. And I came up with that it was 15 miles. And I felt very, very strongly that the body would be 15 miles southwest of where that car was parked.
They drive southwest for 15 miles and find themselves at a field by Chad Whitman's office, an area he can view every day, just as Lori predicted. But there's not enough evidence for a search warrant, and they don't get permission.
The property where the husband worked was a legal issue for us because it was controlled by the suspect's father, and we weren't getting an awful lot of cooperation out of him.
And Chad Whitman is not about to confess. He sticks by his story, nothing more.
Everything's gonna come out. You're gonna find your wife.
Lee and Detective Don Foreman keep up the pressure.
He had recently moved, and Bob and I showed up at his house. Hey, how you doing? Could we come in and chat with you?
I've told you my story.
And the idea was to make him understand that we weren't going to go away.
We wanted Chad to crack. We wanted him to know that we were stepping up the pressure.
They stay on him, everywhere.
During that time frame, our suspect was flittering around from girlfriend to girlfriend.
He basically dropped his daughter off at his parents' house and then went on about his happy-go-lucky life, partying with his friends, hanging out in bars, running around with people at all hours of the day and night.
Though authorities don't know it yet, the pressure is getting to Chad Whitman.
What are you looking at?
Nothing.
At last, he spills it, but not to the police.
My name is Lorraine Fernandez. I know that he killed his wife.
In Oregon, it doesn't take a psychic to know that Chad Whitman killed his wife, but it might take one to prove it. Police have no good leads until Detective Bob Lee receives a stunning call from Whitman's new girlfriend.
She said that he had killed his wife, and he had admitted that he had strangled her, and that he had done away with the body.
She says she and Chad frequently drove past his office.
And every time that they would drive by that particular area, she noted that he would get quiet, and sometimes he would gaze off into the distance, you know, where the building in which he worked. She knew there was something that had to do with the murdered wife and that building. She just didn't know what it was.
But she knows someone who might.
Brother knows some information on the murder.
She said that the younger brother would know at least as much as she did.
But Chad's brother, Rudy, swears he was in California when Zoe left and has no idea what happened to her. If Rudy doesn't talk, maybe his roommates will.
The younger brother was the type that would talk about this sort of thing, which meant that his two roommates would know everything that he knew.
All right, guys.
This is a grand jury subpoena.
The roommates take the hint,
You will go to court, you will testify, or you will go to jail.
telling all they know about Rudy's involvement.
Rudy went to the baseball game in California, but it got rained out, so he wasn't there the whole time.
Chad and Rudy's alibi, the baseball game, never happened. The roommates say Rudy was in Oregon at the time, and he helped Chad dispose of Zoe's body.
He said he wasn't in California. He lied to everyone. He was really in
And
Oregon, and he was helping
they'll
Zoe
testify.
with his body.
We had enough testimony that we would be able to put the younger brother in jail, period. So we contacted the younger brother, advised him he had the opportunity to either tell us everything that he knew and lead us to where the body was buried, or he could go to jail and he would stay there.
Rudy decides to talk. He says Chad told him he didn't mean to kill Zoe. They argued, and it got out of hand, just as Lori McQuarrie had said.
What I basically sensed was that this was a moment of rage. I did not feel that this murder had been planned out in great detail.
Lori's story was extremely accurate. As far as the argument, the strangling, the location of the body, the younger brother being involved.
No, I need you right now. Just come over and help me.
According to Rudy, after Chad strangled Zoe, he called his brother to help him get rid of the body. They took it to a place where Chad could keep an eye on it, right outside his office. Then they planted Zoe's car at a rest stop across the Washington border, 15 miles away. With a warrant, authorities head to the field outside Chad's office and find the grave.
He was working that day. We parked on purpose so that he could see our marked police car, so he knew exactly who was there. And you could turn around from the gravesite and see the front door and see where he worked. I knew this bad guy was watching us, and we found his skeleton, and I was sad, upset, angry. It was like I'm looking at this sacred area where this human being is, knowing that, you know, somebody threw boards and dirt on a person and left them there, and this person did it in a place where he's going to drive to work every day and look out in this field and know, hey, there's a body I put out there, a human being I killed.
It gave me the creeps to feel that this guy had been looking down on her grave for all these months, for all this time, and that he was able to guard the victim from the police all that time.
Police arrest Chad Whitman and charge him with first-degree murder.
In the beginning, this case was a little bit like somebody took a bag of marbles and dumped them on the floor and they just scattered every which way, and there was no theory, design, or anything that we could figure out from all the bits and pieces that we had. When we talked to Lori, it was exciting to me because what she did is she created the picture for us. I cannot discount psychics anymore. I became a believer.
Bob Lee became a believer in Lori McQuarrie, too. 4 months after they solved the case, they got married.
I think it's a shame that this had to be the way that my husband and I had to meet romantically, is through somebody else's loss. And believe me, every day I silently send up a prayer to this situation. Most importantly, that it ended. And it ended on a positive note of accountability.
Chad Whitman pleads the murder charge down to manslaughter and is sentenced to 20 years in prison. Lori and Bob recently celebrated their 18th anniversary. In Oregon, justice and love prevailed for a family, police, and a gifted psychic. In California, a chance encounter with another psychic helps a lost soul return to her grieving family. Santa Clara County in Northern California. On Sunday, January 5th, 1992, Norman and Maria Hofer are frantic. Their 31-year-old daughter, Norma, went out last night,
Chief Detective.
leaving her children in their care.
I want to talk to him. Yes.
Norma Hofer never came back.
When she wasn't home the next morning, we knew something was wrong, because she was dedicated to her children. She never would have just taken off and left them.
But the sheriff's department cannot help much.
They said, she's only been gone 24 hours. And I said, I don't care if she's only been gone 2 hours. I said, she's not home. She would have been home. I need someone to do something.
Deputy Michelle Sandry sympathizes with the distraught parents.
They were pretty upset. We explained to them that, I'm sorry, but adults are allowed to go and do what they need to do.
But Maria knows Norma wouldn't just run off.
We hadn't heard from her, didn't know where she was, which was so out of character for her. She was the kind of person who would walk over glass to get to her kids.
Unfortunately, all Norma's parents can do is wait and hope for some sign of their daughter. The next day, they get that sign, though it's not good news. 25 miles south, in downtown San Jose, a maintenance worker finds Norma's purse in an alley.
When they found the purse in San Jose, I knew there was something wrong, that she was never going to come home again.
Nobody knows where Norma is or what happened to her. But soon, she herself will contact a psychic to help her find peace.
I had an overwhelming feeling of sadness and pain. And she did not want to cross over to the other side until she was found. So she chose me to help her.
On a Saturday night in Northern California, single mother Norma Hofer goes out for a night of dancing. And never comes home. Deputy Michelle Sandry and Sergeant Carrie Cola take up the missing persons investigation.
Usually when an adult comes up missing the very next day, it's noted, but you don't send people out on it because a person who's an adult has a right to go and leave the premises. It became suspicious when her purse was found, and the lieutenant had told us to go talk with the parents.
But before Cola can leave, he's interrupted.
I get a phone call from a lady by the name of Danielle Patton in Los Angeles. She's worked for a private attorney. She had a question about a previous incident that I had handled.
It's the type of routine call he gets every day. Except this time, the caller is psychic.
Female.
Cola's busy and tries to end the call.
So, do you have any...
And before he could finish his sentence, I said, oh, there's a homicide, and it's a woman, and you're gonna find her wrapped in a blue blanket, and she's been strangled. And you're gonna find her in a rural area by the side of a hill. And he said, okay.
It was just amazing how she said this, you know, just out of the blue. And I listened, but obviously I was very skeptical.
Danielle explains her gift.
I see visual things. It's almost like looking at a movie. I can look at a person's face and see something very happy or something very tragic. I also hear audio. I will know it's not coming from my ears. I'll know it's coming from the mind, coming from above.
I had never dealt with a psychic before. I know other law enforcement agencies had.
He said, well, you know, I don't believe in psychics. And I said, okay, that's fine. You don't have to. I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to remember what I'm telling you.
And I made her a deal. I said, I'll tell you what, you know, if any of this comes to fruition, I'll give you a call back.
And I said, you know, that's a deal. You do that.
En route to the Hofer residence, Cola briefs his partner.
When he told me about the psychic, I've never dealt with psychics before. I said, no, really? And he just said it kind of like scoffing, kind of like, whatever, to me. And I'm just thinking, well, yeah, I agree. It's kind of weird.
The investigators want to know everything about when Norma was last seen.
And she always calls. She called
The
once a day.
real issue was that she's never left the children unattended
Again from
before.
a friend's house.
And that was the part that was really out of character for her. It wasn't simply a fact of an adult going out into a party atmosphere and then, for whatever reason, not returning home.
When Norma didn't return, her parents
Anyway,
started a
everything's in the
phone log
logbook.
to record their
I wrote
efforts
down
to find her.
when she called from her friend's house.
The first call was from Norma late that Saturday night.
Notes, I hope that you can...
She said she had stopped off at a party at a friend's house and would be back by 1 a.m. She left the number where she could be reached.
But the next morning, she wasn't home. So we called that number. And they said she wasn't there, that she had been taken home. I said, no, she's not home. Who took her?
The friend says it was a man named Bobby Biggs.
The assumption by everybody that was attended this party was that Bobby was going to give Norma a ride home. Nobody really paid attention. They only knew that Bobby was supposed to drive her home.
Police can't find Biggs, but they get a call from one of his friends.
When he had heard that Norma was missing and that Bobby Biggs was the last person to have seen her, he remembered that Bobby had come to his house the next morning about 7:30 in the morning, and even at the time, it really upset him because Bobby just walked into the house. And then as he's looking at Bobby, he's seeing that he's got mud on his pants and his shoes are all muddy, and that he's got some blood on his t-shirt.
Nothing.
And he just looks disheveled.
Nothing.
Biggs said he wanted help dropping off a
Don't worry
car.
about it. Come on, it's easy. Let's do it.
The friend refused to help. He thought it was strange. Biggs doesn't own a car. From his description of the vehicle, investigators suspect it was Norma's. Biggs is no stranger to Santa Clara law enforcement.
When we caught up with him because of this case, he was currently on parole.
Because Biggs is on parole, he can be questioned and searched at any time. And since witnesses placed him at a bar, which is a violation of his parole, he can be arrested. They have the suspect, but only the vision of a distant psychic will put investigators on the trail of the missing woman. And the end of this story is a surprise to everyone.
I'm sorry she came. Did anybody feel her? She was standing right by your shoulder.
In 1992, single mother Norma Hofer disappears. And Santa Clara investigators track down the last person to have seen her, Bobby Biggs. They arrest him on a parole violation and search his trailer. But Deputy Michelle Sandry finds nothing that connects him to the disappearance.
We had all kinds of suspicions that he was the one who probably was the reason why she was missing. But at this point, we didn't have a body. We didn't know what had happened. You know, who knows? Maybe she did just up and run away. We don't know.
Investigators observe scratches on the suspect's hands, arms, and face. The wounds appear to have been inflicted by someone defending against an attack. But Biggs claims he scratched himself on rose bushes while doing yard work. He gives them his version of what happened the night Norma disappeared. He admits he was at the party with Norma. He claims the next morning, she gave him a ride to the store to buy beer. Then, according to Biggs, Norma dropped him off at a park. He assumed she was going home, and he hasn't seen her since. Biggs insists that he and Norma have known each other a long time. He'd never do anything to harm her. Police suspect Biggs is lying, but they can't prove it.
It doesn't add up.
At this point, the only thing keeping their suspect in jail and off the street is the parole violation, according to Sergeant Carrie Cola.
It's still very circumstantial at this point. You know, all the suspicion is focusing on him. But what could we charge him with? There was nothing to charge him with at this point.
Investigators need evidence and serve a search warrant at the last place Norma was seen alive, the house where the party was held. The owner of the house was not there Saturday night.
I mean, it was on the bed.
She says that she came home Sunday afternoon and discovered someone had trashed her room.
Donna! What?
They find what looks like bloodstains on the
It's
mattress.
not there. This is all new bedding and mattress and everything.
Crime scene technicians collect samples from the mattress, the wall, and the carpet. Forensic tests confirm it's blood, Norma's. But still nothing that incriminates Bobby Biggs.
We've got ourselves a suspect. We've got ourselves a crime scene. But we don't have the body. We don't have the vehicle.
At this point, where do you look? South County is a big geographical area, several hundred square miles. It's steep, rough terrain, hilly, shrubbery, and a lot of places one could put a body.
Please. Norma's spirit contacted psychic Danielle Patton to help find her body.
She wanted me to see through her eyes. So she took my mind where she was laying, and she showed me where she was. And I could see her image standing a few feet away from where she was. And she wanted me to find her and tell them where she was, because she wanted to go home to her family.
Danielle feels that Norma was strangled, and her body is wrapped in a blue blanket on a hillside in a rural area. As investigators scour the vast Northern California landscape, they worry that even with Danielle's help, Norma Hofer may never be found. But Norma's spirit is not giving up. And this special episode ends with a special message from beyond.
But she was standing right by your shoulder. She didn't want to go away. She wanted to say something, so I couldn't stop her, so I just had to let her finish.
In 1992, in California's Santa Clara County, Deputy Michelle Sandry and Sergeant Carrie Cola search for the body of a young mother. Norma Hofer's spirit is restless and seeks the help of psychic Danielle Patton.
Please help me come home.
She would come in fragments. Sometimes it would be clear, sometimes it would not be clear. The only thing that came through really clear from her was where she was. That was the most important thing to her, was to be with her family. Because she knew that's where the love was. And she wanted to feel something familiar. She was feeling cold. She wanted to feel something familiar and warm. So she wanted to go back to the family.
Norma showed Danielle where her body is. On a hillside, in a rural area, wrapped in a light blue blanket. Investigators just need to find her. 5 days after Norma's disappearance, Cola and Sandry spot a location that fits the psychic's vision.
Fence, right over there.
Stop. I thought I saw something. Yeah, something blue. Barely.
I got out of my car. I look and I see a silhouette. I immediately called my partner and said to Michelle, get over here.
There is a body. There's a body, I would say maybe 15, 20 feet into this thicket. You could tell that the body's laying flat on its back with a light blue blanket covering her. And Cole and I just kind of look at each other like, you've got to be kidding me. This has got to be Norma.
You're going by at 100 miles an hour, if you will,
Dispatch.
in this investigation, and all of a sudden it's like hitting a wall. You're relieved because now you've concluded the missing person's part, but there's still an emptiness about was a human being a few days ago, now she's dead, children left behind.
And going back in.
The site is just 3/10 of a mile from suspect Bobby Biggs' home. Norma's parents get the news.
They finally found her where the psychic had told them she would be. So that's something to be grateful for anyway, because there's nothing worse than to never have closure.
The medical examiner tells investigators that the hyoid bone in the neck has been fractured.
At that particular time, they determined the cause of death as strangulation. So that was just another point that Danielle had made. So when we got back to the office, I called her like I promised I would. And I told her, you know what, you're something else. We found this lady under a blanket, like you said. Cause of death is strangulation.
He asked, how did you do it? And I said, well, she just came to me and told me. And he kind of chuckled a little bit, and he goes, you know, I really don't believe in this. He goes, this is quite an experience.
We kept talking a little further, and they mentioned the fact that we were still missing the victim's car.
Then he goes, we've looked and looked and looked, and we just don't know where it is. And I said, well, you know, it's in San Jose, and it's in a parking garage. I knew it was in a parking garage because I saw concrete top, bottom, and sides, and I saw concrete columns. And I saw the car parked there.
San Jose police check all area parking garages and find Norma's car. Numerous parking tickets indicate the car's been there ever since Norma disappeared.
211, code 4.
When the evidence techs went over the car, not only did they find that the driver's seat was pushed back to its furthest limits that would accommodate Bobby's big frame, but they found his fingerprints within the car, and they also found light blue fibers from the blue blanket in the vehicle.
Also, traces of Norma's blood. Although her body has been found and her vehicle recovered, the details of exactly what happened to Norma Hofer the night she disappeared remain a mystery.
Okay.
Then authorities find a young man who had been at the party with Norma. He had been afraid to speak before, but now he has to get it off his chest. He says that after the party died down, he was trying to sleep on the couch in the living room. He heard a terrible banging noise, thumping, like someone being thrown against a wall. Then he saw Bobby Biggs. He was carrying what looked like a body wrapped in a blue blanket.
So this young kid pretty much tied the whole thing together as to what we had assumed had happened that night.
Bobby Biggs pleads guilty to the first-degree murder of Norma Hofer and receives a life sentence, eligible for parole after 25 years.
I'm going to make sure when he comes up for parole that if I'm not there, one of the kids would be there to say he shouldn't have parole. I don't ever want to see him get out, personally.
Sergeant Carrie Cola began this case as a skeptic.
In my opinion, I think psychics do have a place in police work. Excellent. Not everybody is maybe as adept as Danielle. There might even be some people out there that portray to be psychics that are not. But in this case, I can guarantee you she is a good psychic.
When Danielle Patton was interviewed for this story, Norma Hofer's spirit came to her one more time with a message.
She's going to be covered in a blue blanket. Thank you. Yes.
Wants to take a beat.
You're safe. Yes. I will tell them. Yes. Yes, I will. Thank you. I'm sorry she came.
Well.
Did anybody feel her? She was standing right by your shoulder.
Oh, yeah.
She didn't want to go away. She wanted to say something, so I couldn't stop her, so I just had to let her finish. When you talk to her mother, and maybe that's why she came, because she knew you were going to, she wants you to tell her thank you for everything that she did, and that she does love her, and that she does look down, and that she does come and see her. And she said that sometimes her mother feels her around her, and to tell her mother that yes, that's her, and tell her children that she does love them.
Two young mothers. One murdered by the man who swore to love her. The other strangled by someone she thought she could trust. Both stolen from their children and families. Both brought back home by concerned police who agreed to work with psychics.